The following is intended for mature audiences only.
Welcome to the news from La La Land podcast. Yeah! Welcome to the news from La La Land, where two siblings with a strange and sheltered past share their story through pop culture, philosophy,
And creative nonsense.
Yes. I am your host, Sarah Sokol, and I'm here with my older brother, Nick, as you all know.
Hello.
So yeah, I think we're going to just start out this first episode with letting you know where we're coming from, who we are. Seems important.
Can we literally do like a bullet point intro here? Like I actually have bullet points.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, go for it. Let's trade bullet points. You go first.
Bullet point number 1. We grew up in a mid-sized agricultural town in eastern Washington.
Yes, Washington State.
And if you're not from Washington, yeah, you may not be aware that eastern Washington is kind of like a different state than western Washington, where Seattle is.
Yeah, there's a rain shadow that sort of somehow changes both the weather and culture at the same time.
Amazing how that works. Yeah, you're driving to give you a picture, you're driving through this rolling desert of hills, not a tree in sight, just kind of scrub brown hills, and you encounter this sign that says, "Welcome to Yakima, the Palm Springs of Washington."
Springs of Washington. Yeah.
And depending on what time of year you're there, you're getting out of your car and it's 7 degrees outside, or you're getting out of your car and it's 103 degrees outside. So anyway, that's the context. That's where we were. It was the 1990s. And any of the things that you might associate with the 1990s and the popular culture of that time, we weren't really experiencing much of that because we were at home being homeschooled. Sorry, I stole your bullet point. This is bullet point number 2.
How dare you? Yeah, I was just going to say, just a couple of quick examples of things from the 90s. I've pulled up a small list, too, that is...
Oh, sorry, I totally jumped the gun here.
No, it's totally fine. It's just a side thing I did. It should not take long, but it's you might be a 90s kid if...
Oh, God.
You predicted your future by playing MASH. No idea.
I don't know what that is.
No clue what that means. It was worth getting up early on a Saturday to watch cartoons.
Well, it's only worth it if you had a television.
Yeah, exactly.
See bullet point number 2.
Yeah, exactly. And things like you wish Jumanji was a real game. Did we know what Jumanji was? No, we did not.
No, we didn't.
Anyway, we can move on. All that to say this, we were homeschooled and we did like it, but at the time we definitely didn't know what we were missing, I would say.
That's true. Yeah, there's plenty of things from the 90s that maybe it was okay to have missed, and a lot of cool things about being homeschooled, some unique experiences and opportunities that you have as a homeschooler, but at the same time we were extremely isolated from the culture around us, and not just by being homeschooled. There was a religious component there that further isolated us. We belonged to an Orthodox Christian church, which I promise, this is the bullet point version, we are going to go deeply into talking about the Orthodox Church, some of the hilarious, unique, and fascinating things that are specific to that faith and why it was so led to such a bizarre environment that we grew up in. But it was just a very conservative, very closed off, kind of cloistered community that served to further isolate. I mean, everyone we knew, all of our friends, was from the church.
Yeah, which wasn't the case for everyone in that church, but in general, our church was, like some Orthodox communities, Greek Orthodox communities, they're less astringent, I think, than our community was. We had a very strict leader who, just kind of led everyone in this very pious and devout way. So even the kids who did go to public school in the church were still, living very different lives than the rest of their public school peers, I think. But then Nick and I, even, I think, further so removed in that we were homeschooled.
Yeah, and the way that we were raised was kind of the recommended way in the church. It was this was the ideal path. If you could homeschool your kids, keep them away from learning about evolution and the world, and teach them a biblical and orthodox worldview at home, shelter them. That was the thing to do, and yeah. Our parents were on it.
Yeah, like you said, it's very like Yakima's temperatures. I think there's huge positives and huge negatives to it, because I personally, who I was and who I still am, I think public school would have been a hellish nightmarescape for me. I would have probably been bullied constantly, and I already have issues with depression and anxiety, so I think it just would have been a sad situation. But at the same time, I don't think being sheltered from everything is good for a kid either. So
yeah, so that's a little bit about the history there, and we're going to go, like I said, further into those things, deep dives into some of those topics and specific challenges around them in future episodes. But just before we go on, really quickly, what are you up to these days? After all that, you've been out of the church for many years now. You're 28,
right.
I'm 30.
Almost 29 now, bitches. So
we've flown the coop. We're still on really good terms with our family, but we are no longer associated with the church. So what are you doing? And if you're not going to church 5 days a week, and reading the prologue and the lives of the saints every night, what are you doing?
Yeah, the prologue, by the way, not a normal book prologue. They're like books of saint stories, basically. Anyway, what I'm doing...
More on that later.
Exactly. What I'm doing is, a lot of things. Obviously, I'm recording podcasts right now. I am also an audiobook narrator for Audible. Other than that, I also am a writer. I've self-published one of my books, as you know, and you've, of course, Nick, my dear brother, been very supportive.
Yeah, Sarah I've read all your books.
Well, not all of them. You definitely haven't read all of them, but you've read more than I think any other one person has read of them. That's
true. You've written a lot of books.
Yeah.
But the ones that I have read are deeply entertaining, and Sarah is a very witty writer, the best dialogue.
Oh, yeah. Stop. But yeah, that's about it for me. I do also, of course, now that I live in the modern world, I have gaming interests and a lot of, fantasy interests. I will admit some of the books that I'm narrating are a little bit steamy, if you catch my drift. And so
oh, I think I do.
Yeah, so I'm living a little bit of a scandalous lifestyle compared to what it was. Even though I'm stressed now about other things, I'm more settled in what I'm doing, and I feel like the older I get, to be honest, yes, I'm scared of the inevitable approach of death, but also I just feel more and more at home in my own skin and my own brain. And
wow, you just got really existential there for a second.
Well, that's what we do here in the news from La La Land. Okay, I would like to extend the same offer to you and ask you to tell me what you're up to in the current times. So we've talked about young Nick. Let's talk about elderly Nick.
Elder Nick of 30 years. In the year of our Lord, 2020. I do kind of a hodgepodge of things that are a result of my eclectic pasts and collection of interests that I've had over the years. I get really deeply into things, as all of us Sokols do. And the result of which that I'm married. I have 2 young kids. So that keeps me quite busy. I'm also a nurse. I'm a registered nurse. I work at in cardiology, and that's my day job. I do enjoy it. And then I'm also, the other big thing that I do is I'm a jazz musician. I've played music since I was very young, and I went to college to study music. I play the saxophone and the mandolin, and when we're not in quarantine for a global pandemic, I do perform regularly still. And when I'm at home, yeah, I do little recording projects and
Yeah, and you're actually responsible for most of the music that everybody is hearing on this podcast as
no,
well.
no, that is a joint effort. Those jingles, those jingles were written and recorded by both of us.
Yeah, and you also have recently started reading a lot of really classic literature.
It's true. I do
So
love to read.
it kind of, yeah, what it seems like is that you are basically the perfect Renaissance man.
I'm not. People say Renaissance man. People throw this word around all the time with respect to me, and I've never really known what it means. But
I don't even know what that means. What is a genius? Exactly.
what is genius? Yeah. Well, you know that I'm only reading all those great books in the classic literature because I felt left out. I didn't read as much fiction as a kid, and I needed to play catch up with the rest of my family of avid readers. So it was a kind of a competitive thing to start with. But I do love reading books. I'm always reading something, and I read good books.
Yeah, he does. He reads books much more exalted than the ones that I hang out with.
But that's, I think, probably enough tooting of our own horns, so to speak.
All right. I just wanted to make sure that we had equal horn tooting because I felt like you tooted my horn for a really long time.
Well, my horn feels well tooted. Thank you very much.
God. This is falling apart. Let's talk about how our upbringing, we already mentioned it a little bit, but not knowing a lot about pop culture. It's definitely been a little bit of, like you said, a competitive social obstacle that we've sort of had to climb repeatedly as we grow.
And it's not just the TV that we were left out of. It's just so many references, little toys that people had, video games, even books that were popular for kids and adults at the time. So yeah, that brings us to our next section, the pop culture moment.
Pop culture moment.
Yeah.
Welcome to the pop culture moment.
Yeah, let's talk about books since we've been talking about books already today.
Yeah.
What did you? I mean, I guess there's kind of two elements to this. There's pop culture, and books that were popular at the time, and then there's like the further restriction and isolation that we had because of the dual pressures of homeschooling and orthodoxy and conservatism. How did that affect your literary background?
Well, a lot. I've actually been doing a side project where I have been reading some of these classic books that I read as a kid, like the only types of books that I was allowed to read. Things like Little Women, Jane Eyre, Tale of Two Cities for some reason.
Laura Ingalls.
Yeah, anything by Laura Ingalls, anything by Jane Austen. Let's see, The Witch of Blackbird Pond. All of these books that are like, just very classic. And even though, I was allowed to read Grimm's fairy tales as well, anything that was really old for some reason was kind of more allowed and acceptable, including the first poetry that I ever experienced was a Tennyson's poem, which I was like scandalized by because it's this long form poem about Merlin being seduced by Nimue, this nymph. And so there's all this like seductive language of her like twining herself around him like a vine and stuff like that.
Yeah, so there's some shit the public schoolers didn't get.
Yeah. So, the classics, letting your kids only read classics and poetry does not necessarily protect them, of course. But there was this one author that I kind of mainly wanted to talk about because she was the one author that I was not allowed to read. Well, not the one, but she was the major one that I wanted to read so bad, but I wasn't allowed by Mom. And it was Tamara Pierce. She's extremely prolific. She's written a crap ton of young adult novels, mainly starring like strong fantasy girls with swords or girls with magic type of characters.
How do they hold up, by the way? Have you read one recently?
I have read one as recently as last year. I reread one of the In the Realm of the Gods books.
Nice.
And yeah, she was actually really progressive writer, I think. She has, these girls, obviously, they're sort of coming of age stories usually. They're learning about their own bodies and their own sexuality in a mild way as well, but not in a pornographic way. And they're just very full of adventure and character, and they're diverse. They have a lot of different races and cultures involved, and they tend to teach lessons about like acceptance and things like that. And I recently, I used to like sneak these books under the covers at night and stuff, and like secretly read them underneath other books at the library.
That is amazing. I mean, as an origin story for a fantasy writer and D&D aficionado, I mean, that you had to like smuggle your Tamara Pierce into bed at night and read it with a flashlight under the covers so you didn't get caught. I mean, yeah, that's an awesome backstory.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah. Although, to be fair, I think Mom did later say that she did know that I was doing it, but it seemed like a mild rebellion, so she allowed it to continue.
Wow, yeah, she was picking her battles. Well, it's okay. The books that you just described, like the thematic content that you just described sounds awesome. What do you think it was about these books that made our parents want to protect you from that?
Yeah. So I think there's probably a lot of factors. Like, there's probably a lot of peer pressure at the time, with Harry Potter in particular. This big fantasy series about kids, and it was sort of a little bit phrased as like kids versus adults in some parts of the series, which is a major thing that Mom was not okay with. She did not like stories that the adults were the villains and the kids were the heroes.
Those are the best stories in the world.
Exactly. Kids love those stories. Are you kidding me? Because that's often how kids see the world, I think. You're just trying to stop me from having fun. But yeah, I actually called Mom to ask her just a couple of days ago because I was thinking about this.
Reconciliation.
Yeah, well, not really, because there's no hard feelings necessarily. Like, I love Mom and we get along well, and you know what? I got my way and I read those Tamara Pierce books anyway. So
and now look what's become of you.
I was gonna say something really offensive. But yeah, so she said that she doesn't remember what exactly her issue was. And she says that now, and even as I suspected, Stephen and Emma, our younger siblings, were also allowed to read pretty much whatever they wanted within the realm of
that is bullshit.
Non-pornographic.
Bullshit. No.
Yeah. Yeah. She was like, I don't remember exactly what my issue was with Tamara Pierce, but overall, I was just much more strict with you guys in terms of limiting what you could consume. That included books, that included TV, that included movies, everything.
And that leads you to the question of, did she realize that she was too restrictive with us and make a conscious change, or did she just fail on Stephen and Emma to live up to the restrictive standards of our childhood?
Well, I've heard this from a lot of people that have a lot of kids, and she had 5 kids in her life, which I think counts as a lot. That the last few, they just tend to be tired, and they have sort of seen their older kids grow up into whatever they wanted to be anyway, and so at that point, they tend to kind of just let go a little more. Is what I've heard. So it could be just part of that sort of common phenomenon.
Discovering the futility of parenting.
Yeah.
God. As a parent, it's depressing, but true. I think the literature actually bears that out. God, did I just say that?
Sounded smart to me.
With all that we're learning about genetics now, parents really have less to do with how their kids turn out than we ever thought before. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of people probably have their first kids as like in order to be an extension of themselves and stuff. But maybe once you have so many, you kind of just don't have that need anymore. Like you've already fulfilled your legacy, and so you're kind of like,
Yeah. Well, our parents had something to prove with us. I mean, they had just joined this cult religion that was very, strict and intense and ascetic, even in its practices. Like, once again, promise to go into that more in the future. And, that's such a different way of life than from the way both our parents were living before that, they had something to prove. They needed to, like, show their mettle, I think, to themselves as much as anyone else, and show that they had become these new spiritual heroes that they wanted to be,
Absolutely. And we've been talking about Mom a lot because she's the one that's still with us, but we have lost our father. But he was just a very extreme man in a lot of ways. So like anything he did, he was like that. He had to devote himself to it 1,000% and just throw himself into it. So and I'm sure that had something to do with it as well.
Yeah, especially and with their marriage, the man being seen as the head of the family, this was going to be our little like monastery religious experiment happening there. I mean, and so it's a little bit different for me. I think it sounds like at the time, I bought into all of this very heavily independently myself. So my parents were restrictive, but I was on board with all of it. They didn't want me to read Harry Potter. Well, of course I shouldn't read Harry Potter. There's witchcraft in there.
It's gonna make me a witch.
Yeah, and with the religious stuff, I wanted to be a monk for a long time during my childhood. It appealed to an aspect of me that my friends will tell you, will not deny this, that I have there's a part of me that is very elitist and like especially when it comes to intellectual things and the Orthodox.
Right, you want to belong to the club.
Yeah, the Orthodox Church really appealed to that side of me, like, oh, if you're going to be religious, are you going to be one of those feel-good Christians, or are you going to belong to the oldest, the most rigorous, ascetic, where my heroes were the Holy Fathers that would go off into the desert for 30 years and eat almost nothing and
with nothing but a loaf of bread.
torture themselves and have visions, and that was those were my early childhood heroes.
Those things are what are lauded by the church.
Yeah. So if we're gonna to bring it back around to literature.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask, like, do you feel like then because you were on board, you don't feel like your literature is like with me where it felt like a restriction, but for you maybe didn't feel so much like that? Or
the only example I can think of specifically of that was once I wanted to get into comic books. I thought it would be cool to get some Batman and Spider-Man, and my parents wouldn't let me get those. I was allowed to read Superman.
Superman, the only holy superhero.
Yes. And I remember I got one Superman comic book, and it was like Superman being the all-American hero and like playing baseball. He played baseball in this comic, and I remember just being like, "This is dumb. What am I doing here?" So that was as far as my comic book foray ever went. Beyond that, I was when I read books, I would read to learn for information. Generally, I was trying to deepen my knowledge of whatever my latest craze was. So when I got into music, I was reading books about music theory and history, and if I wanted to get into survivalism, I was reading books about that, reading books about how to make or do things.
Oh, I forgot about Tom Brown.
Yeah, the tracker.
That's
the
right,
Tom
the
Brown's Field
tracker.
Guide, how to
Yeah.
skin a squirrel. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. You did skin a squirrel.
If I had to say like a favorite, I did read some fiction, and the one of them, I read many of the books that you were describing from earlier, the Laura Ingalls Wilder books, and
Mhm.
I was able to read Hardy Boys. I had a collection of Hardy Boys books,
That's right.
and of course the one that I still read today that really holds up probably the most is the Lord of the Rings series,
Yes.
which is kind of incredible that Harry Potter and Tamara Pierce are off limits, but you can read Narnia and Lord. Well, okay, Narnia makes a little more sense because it does get a bit nauseatingly allegorical by the time you get to the last battle. But Lord of the Rings was my true love there.
I still think that Mom is a little bit, has that elitist bit of her too. Like maybe Lord of the Rings was allowed, Narnia was allowed because it's an allegory, but maybe Lord of the Rings was allowed because it has that feeling of the like classic,
Mm.
and the writing of it is so eloquent and poetic and beautiful.
There's a lot of depth to the world, and yeah, maybe there's a connection there.
Plus, Dad read The Hobbit and he loved The Hobbit. And you know that he would just be like, "Oh, same guy, same okay,"
Yep, that's true. Yeah, and I think the other thing is, and maybe we're getting a little off track here, but this is interesting stuff. I mean, so we're not allowed to read Harry Potter. I think on some level, a lot of people in the Orthodox community and probably many conservative religious communities don't want you to read Harry Potter, but they will let you read Lord of the Rings because they believe that the magic that happens in Harry Potter is real. And not
It's witchcraft.
that it's not magic, but yeah, that someone could tap into a demonic power of some kind and raise a ghost to torment someone, or save a part of their soul in a Horcrux, or these kind of demonic things that could happen. They really believe that could be possible, and so that feels scarier, more evil, darker. Even though Lord of the Rings is a plenty dark story, it's different.
Yeah, but it has that sort of,
It's a different kind of magic.
the one true good. Yeah, and there's like, it feels much more like a divine magic.
Mm-hmm. And the magic in the Lord of the Rings is something that comes from like the essence of the person that is using the magic. It's not like something you could read in a book and learn how to say certain spells and wave a wand and anyone could learn how to do it. No, this is like Gandalf was a wizard, and like the magic came from him. He was kind of a god, a demigod in that world,
That's really interesting. I never thought about that. Like, I literally never, even back in the day, it seems so silly to me because I had like read little snippets, and it's like someone's literally waving a wand and saying Wingardium Leviosa, and it's what I could do that all day and nothing would happen. But it really is when you really do believe in the devil and the fact that he could grant you power and stuff like that, it suddenly just becomes
spookier. Yeah.
spooky.
So I think probably one of the reasons in hindsight that Lord of the Rings, that whole series, Tolkien, appealed to me so much as a non-literature kid was that it wasn't about the books. It was about the world, right? So the movies, added something to it. It was the maps, the world building, there was a lot of different books that fill in the gaps, and it's that the writing is eloquent, but it's not, it's not the most profound piece of literature. You're not going to learn like deep life lessons or philosophical truths by reading Tolkien. It's just you're learning about this world. And, I was someone who, when I read something or watched something, I had to do it for myself. I had to be an active participant in whatever I was into. So Tolkien was perfect for that. You just become part of this world. You learn about it. You feel like it's real. You can like make your own maps and draw the pictures and collect the action figures and, read the books. But
Did you read the books before you watched the movies?
I did, yeah. Because I was not allowed to watch the movies until I was a little bit older.
Right, of course. Because, I mean, the orcs, they were horrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it's something like Lord of the Rings, you've reread a few times. It might be your desert island book, as it were.
Possibly, yeah.
Or would you pick one of your more intricate, like, current, one of those books that you've read recently where you feel like you could read it over and over and over and over and learn something new every time?
Yeah, it's hard to say because it's hard to say what's gonna stand the test of time, in my own personal canon. Lord of the Rings is I'm not someone who reads books over and over again very often. Lord of the Rings is one of the few series where I've done that, and it's, I've been into it for many, many years. So we'll have to see, like I read Anna Karenina last year. What an incredible novel. Will I read it again? Will I still be talking about it 10 years from now? We'll see. Hopefully.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I remember, just a side tangent that maybe will lead us into our next section here. The first time you guys watched The Return of the King, and I was with Dad, and they had been on the fence whether or not to let me watch it, and then they decided, all right, you can watch it if you want. And I was just like, no, I'm going to see gory things that I don't want to see. And so Dad and I ended up just sitting in the kitchen and playing Progressive Rummy, a card game.
No way.
For like 3.5 hours while you guys watch The Return of the King.
Oh, that's amazing.
Anyway, just a little memory there.
Huh.
But yeah.
That's awesome that Dad played cards with you for 3.5 hours, though.
Yeah, he was definitely all about, I think, quality time.
Yeah.
That was his big thing.
Let's talk more about Dad. That'll segue nicely into our next section, next segment of the podcast, which we're calling the Sokolism of the Day. Sokolism of the Day. Yeah, so what's a Sokolism?
Well, our last name is, of course, Sokol, which is Polish, meaning hawk
Falcon.
or falcon, I
Falcon.
believe. So I think it means
Falcon.
hawk. It's a long stand. Well, agree to disagree.
Right, but it's falcon. And anyway, so yeah.
So yeah, a hawkism is a.
Damn it.
It's just a kind of, I don't know. It's very all-encompassing of what being a Sokol is in terms of like little weird, quirky phrases that Dad used to say, or just strange actions or things that could really only rise out of a specific childhood, I guess.
Well, it'd be worth mentioning here that a lot of what made our family weird and what made our childhood weird was Dad. He was a real eccentric guy. He lived, before meeting Mom and becoming religious, he was a mountain man living in homemade, shelters and cabins and stuff like that in the woods with no electricity and power, fighting forest fires and climbing mountains and living in hippie communes for 7 years.
Yeah, when he ran away, he ran all the fuck away.
That's so true. And then he joined this really kind of strange religious organization called the Brown Brothers, or the Holy Order of Mans, which there's still a website. It's such a cult.
Yeah, it's still a
Plenty
thing,
of stories to come about that in the future, I'm sure. But through that, he got to the Orthodox Church and then met Mom and had us. So anyway, so there's this guy who has created, this strange, energetic force in our life. And, we didn't come up with the term Sokolism. That was coined by someone else, a clergy member in our church.
Yeah.
Because there were so many strange and unique things that were specific to our family that he needed a word. Is this another Sokolism? What's an example of a Sokolism?
Well, like, I mean, maybe other people do this and I don't know, but Dad would often substitute every word he couldn't think of for the word frag. So he would, and it started out with things like, "Can you hand me the frag?" But then it got to the point where he would even say things like, "Can you frag me the frag?" over there.
Oh man, it got substituted for a swear. What the fragrant fork?
Yeah, the fragrant fork and frag.
Who knows where that came from? Some of them do have known origins though, like if someone were to have attempted a job in the house, and Dad had exacting standards on the quality of work that needed to be done, and if you did a job and it didn't,
Yes, you do it thoroughly. You do it right.
and if
the
you
first
fuck
time.
it up, it's a Netzel job.
Yeah.
The Netzel job is a common Sokolism. It's something that might be said around, and no one would have any idea what we were talking about. I did a Netzel job.
Yeah, it comes from him his car getting fixed by someone, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Can we do a dramatic reenactment of this? I'll be Dick Netzel. Hey there, Johnny boy. I heard your fucking brakes not working.
yeah, will you fix them for me?
We'll get you fixed up, no problem. We gotta go to the moment where he picks up the car, and Dick Netzel says, Hey, I got your car, it's all fixed, no worry, no problem. We got you all set up, the brakes are working great, and don't ask me why, I'm feeling super generous today. Not gonna charge you a penny for this. The service today is completely free.
What? Are you That's so generous of you. I can't believe you would do that. A whole job just for me for free?
Yeah, get the fuck out of here before I change my mind.
Man, so thank you so much. What a Netzel job!
Yeah, well, if that wasn't clear, the brakes didn't work afterwards.
Yeah, so it's basically you get what you pay for, is a Netzel job.
Oh man. Well, should we tell a dad story? Give a taste of one of hundreds of bizarre mountain man stories.
Yeah. Let's talk about the story that one of the ones that you wrote that poem about, because
Well, I've written a lot of dad poems. That didn't get listed on my list of hobbies and interests, but our other younger sibling, Stephen, got me into writing some poetry a few years back, and very, very amateur, but
I think you're good, to be honest.
well, I've never been paid for it, so still technically very amateur.
All right. Technically.
So many of Dad's stories were so bizarre and strange that they ended up inspiring a bunch of like fan fiction poetry. Not fiction, I guess. Fan poetry.
Yeah. Let's talk about one of our favorite dad mountain man stories. Do you have one in mind?
But yeah, this is okay. It's kind of this is pre-Mountain Man. There was this period, and I didn't really learn about a lot of these stories till later, till he was near his death. Dad was writing some of these down for me and kind of reminiscing a lot. And some of them, it was such a great background though that explained like how he got to where he was going. Stories of how he escaped out of the cement soup of LA and hitchhiked his way up to the wilderness of Washington. And so this is like in one of his early days discovering nature. And somehow he said he was on a guided hiking trip. Can you imagine Dad going on a guided hiking trip now?
He'll just go into the forest with his kids and then just arbitrarily decide to stay however long he wants just in the forest.
Yeah, we had open-ended backpacking trips. This is a man who loathed to stay on the trail. He hated those stay on the trail signs. So somehow here he was in a different life.
Well, because he was like 17 or something, right?
I don't know how old he was when this happened, but he was on a guided hiking trip up in the mountains. And he must have also realized at some point this was, ridiculous. I bet it was for a girl. There must have been a girl. I don't know. Sorry, Mom. And Dad likes to, whenever we go hiking, we know that he likes to get sidetracked. He'll stop and drive everybody nuts, spending, 5 minutes examining some little bug crawling on a flower or some strange plant that he's never seen before.
Yep, the signature Sokol squat. He would squat down.
Yeah, so he sees this cool creek, and he says, well, why am I walking on this trail with these losers when I could be following this awesome creek up? And so he lets the group go ahead, he wanders off, he starts hiking up this creek bed, and wasn't feeling quite connected enough to nature. So at some point along the way, he strips all of his clothes off, and he is clambering naked up this mountain creek bed, and he follows it all the way up to the source of the creek, where he's seeing water is just dripping out, drop by drop, from the snow into this little trickle of water. And
wow.
I mean, how's that? There, speaking of origin stories.
That is so cool. Because, how many times have we followed creeks in our, as in our childhood adventures and stuff? That's something he still loves to do. I
still love to do it. Yeah. So we should bring, if you would do me the honors of, I've sent you the poem to close out this, the Sokolism. So the Sokolism of the day, we're going to come back to this every episode, and we're going to tell about some weird thing that came out of our family history or from Dad's past. All these stories that will kind of give you a little bit of a taste of where we come from and what our early influences were on. But yeah, let's close out this episode's section with the poem.
Yeah, this poem is entitled Tourists by Nick Sokol. They didn't see the creek bed kaleidoscope, unparalleled sparkle of laughing geometry like I did. They didn't bear the final barrier, stripping to skin with open palms to the leathery hide of nature like I did. They didn't follow the path of geometry to its primary portal to see what the laughing was all about, like I did.
And now that you read that, it makes me feel like there should be another verse or three. This is why I'm still an amateur poet, because no poem ever feels finished.
I wonder if professional poets feel the same way.
I don't know. It's possible.
I thought the poem was beautiful, but I did kind of want it to go on. But yeah, the next section, I think we're just going to sort of go off on a little bit of a tangent here, and we are going to talk about some pointless conjecture. Pointless conjecture!
And I should point out here, so we're each going to ask each other some kind of a hypothetical question. We're neither of us able to prepare for this, so this is going to just be a little exercise in creative reasoning.
Agreed. We have not heard or seen these questions before. Would you like to go first?
Yeah, so we're going to create kind of a Sokol conversation here. This is a typical type of conversation that we would have had in our family. Although, you know what? Mine is kind of serious. It's an existential kind of question, Maybe you should go first. I don't want to overwhelm the segment here.
All right. Well, mine is not very serious or existential. It may take you but a moment to answer. This is a 3-part would you rather question. 1. Would you rather maintain your current relationship with bees? 2. Acquire a Disney princess relationship with bees in which you can command them like an army. Or 3. Be a superhero made up of millions and millions of bees.
Oh my God. A 3-part would you rather. That makes it complex. I feel like I need to have a flow chart here to work this out. Pros and cons of each one. Venn diagrams. I'm not sure what would be the best way to figure this out.
Well, you can just rank them in
My-
order of what you would want for yourself.
Yeah, I feel like my current relationship with bees, and are we rolling in hornets and wasps into this too? I mean, is it just like stinging,
Yeah,
flying
I'll say
things?
that. I'll say it could extend to hornets, wasps, and yellow jackets as well.
All right, so I'm not worrying about like which ones are the nice ones that get pollen and make me honey, and the ones that just want to fucking
Right.
kill
Yeah.
you.
Although you might want to only summon hornets for your battle bees, though, if you're gonna go that route.
That's fair. Yeah, a bumblebee would be a less effective. Although, what has it got to lose but everything?
Well, it dies exactly.
Ultimate kamikaze warrior.
That's true.
I mean, yeah, I think I would have to create an indoctrination program in order to make them ideologically suited for suicide warfare. Maybe we could give it a catchy acronym title like ISIS or something like
yeah,
that.
with, like international standard.
Insect sect.
That's perfect.
Yeah, so I think being able to having the Disney relationship with bees is probably ideal because, if I can control bees, like, okay, my daughter's afraid of bees right now. She freaks out and wants to go inside when she sees anything she thinks is a hornet. I could just be like, all right, bees, stay away from her, Be a cool thing to have. I could tell bees to swarm around someone that I didn't like and not sting them. Do I have like complete control over these bees? Like if you wanted to annoy someone but not hurt them, you could do that.
I would say so because it seems like Disney princesses, do they really control the animals or are they like friends with the animals?
Yeah, I think they have to maintain a positive relationship with these animals in order for them to keep doing their bidding.
If you are made up of millions of bees, you have the awareness of millions of bees and you are all of them. So you are able to do things like control exactly who you want stung and not.
That's true. Maybe you would have more control that way.
Plus you could fly.
Yeah, carry out political assassinations, live in a hive. But come on, there's a lot of things that you would lose being made out of bees. Like, sex is cool.
But bees have sex. You would just constantly be mating with your own queen.
Oh my god, yeah. And if I have the collective consciousness of all of them.
Yeah, so you're just constant orgasms.
Be like that show Sense8 where everyone can experience each other's orgasm all at the same time. And it's just like a giant bee hive orgasm machine. All right, I think we've discovered the ultimate one would definitely be being made out of bees. And then I would have to say the Disney one after that. This really, and then my current relationship with bees at the bottom.
Yeah.
This really didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go.
How did you think it was going to go?
Well, I just didn't think that being made out of bees, who would have thought that it could be so incredible?
That's true. I guess my instinct would have been Disney princess, but the fact that you don't have control and you have to be friends with them, I think that's what changes it.
And that reminds me of another story, if I could go a tangent upon a tangent here, of an Orthodox guy that I stayed with, who was my first roommate when I was in college. My stepping stone to the real world. You could tell he was an Orthodox guy because of the very long beard and sort of the quirky, odd, quiet sense of humor and the seriousness with which he took life.
But with a twinkle in his eye.
Always with a twinkle, yes, yeah. He was an interesting guy also. And he was my roommate. And when I say long beard, I'm talking about like dick length beard here. Not as long as his dick, but like down to the dick. This is really not the best analogy.
Right. You didn't know how long his dick was.
I never encountered the dick. All right, so Dickbeard was my landlord, and he told me that he used to get stung by bees all the time, and that he had a real problem with it for a long time. And then he decided one day that he had a dream about it, and he encountered a bee like in the dream, and some voice said like, man, I can't remember what it was, but he was told that he didn't have to worry about that anymore. And he woke up just in the knowledge that he was a friend of bees from then on out. And he said after that dream, he was never stung again for the rest of his life. And of course, me and my other roommate, we another college student, we kind of laughed about it, and we didn't believe it. But then sure enough, one day we had this nasty, huge hornet flying around inside the living room. And we remembered the story. We were like, Dickbeard, come over here and help us out with this bee. I was too afraid to try, and he just goes up and he says, come on, my brother, and he kind of cups his hands around that area and sort of gestures gently toward the door, says like, let's go, my brother. And the hornet it was a long ways away, probably 80 feet away from the door, flies straight out.
Wow.
So that's the story of Dickbeard and the bees.
Wow, the true Disney princess relationship with
Yeah,
bees.
yeah. So this is not hypothetical for me, it's a real world experience.
That's amazing. Would you rather be Dickbeard or Beegasm?
Oh man, especially if I could be called Beegasm. It's gotta be that. Are you ready for your own question?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to end this podcast on a serious note.
So this also is a 3-part question, and I guess I'll read all 3 of them to you. So, well, no, you know what? We're going to take it one part at a time, because I think it's more fun if you have to answer the next one after having answered the first one. So, what fantastical turn of events would have to happen in order to convince you that there is some God?
It couldn't be a dream for me, even if it was a very vivid dream, because I've had a long history of extremely vivid nightmares in particular. So I don't think that something I saw in like a dream or a vision would ever convince me.
That's fair.
So it would need to be something in the physical world. For me, it would have to be like a specific event that I was able to experience that was by itself so fantastical that it wasn't explainable. But to be honest, I feel like that even then I might just explain it away with, be like, oh, just because we don't understand it doesn't mean that suddenly I believe in God with a big white dick beard. And,
exactly. This is really fun for me watching you discover how hard this question is. It's one thing to say, why don't you believe in God? It's another thing, what would the specific thing, because here's the thing. Yeah, if you're going to take a scientific view of the world, you have to come up with the simplest possible explanation for the things that you see. And so let's say, somebody says, I'm going to pray over this water and turn it into wine, and then it turns into wine. That doesn't necessarily mean there's a God. That just means some weird transmogrification of nature just happened.
Exactly. We don't, in the same way that a Christian will experience a tragedy, and to them that doesn't mean God hates me now. It just means that's a tragedy they're having to go through. I feel like I would kind of see it in the same way that just because this anomaly has happened that I don't understand doesn't mean suddenly I'm wrong about everything. Yeah. Oh, it turns out gay people are bad. Oops, So I just feel like there's not necessarily a direct correlation between a miracle and the belief in God, now that I think about it. So I guess I would have to die.
Yeah, you're allowed to get as fantastical as you want here. I mean, this is a complete fantasy, so you're allowed to say, I would have to see, I am the God of the universe, written in clouds, in fire in the sky, and visible from every single part of the earth. And everyone correlates with the same observation. Something like that. It could be something like that, if God really wanted to reveal himself to us, he could do something like that. And if it was that elaborate and everyone corroborated this all around the world, maybe that'd be enough. But the second part of this question is, as hard as it would be to prove that first part, as elaborate as the proof would need to be, then beyond that, what would it take to further convince you that it's specifically the Christian God?
I die and have an intricate experience where I go to the pearly gates and I see St. Peter there, or I go like in the Christian or in the Orthodox specifically, when you die, you go through toll houses where you're forced to account for each of your sins on a sort of a tier of sin badness.
More on that later.
Yeah. So I feel like I would just have to experience the afterlife part of it, because I just think my cynical brain at this point would rather believe that it was just something I didn't understand yet, but not a Christian God,
Well, no, and that's completely reasonable because we know that hallucinations are a real thing. We know that vivid dreams are a real thing. We know that even mass hallucinations, where groups of people will hallucinate the same thing, are real, documented, scientifically validated phenomena. So even if you're dying and feel like you've died and gone to paradise, I mean, what's the more likely explanation? That there actually is, some mysterious God of the universe who sent his son down to earth to die for our sins, or that you're having a hallucination? One of those things is scientifically validated phenomenon.
Yeah.
The other one is a completely fantastical and unlikely.
Yeah. And I can totally see why a human, would want to. Humans are so egocentric. We want to make everything about ourselves. So it makes total sense that you would have this near-death experience where you experience the concept of losing yourself in the universe, and you've had this, transcendent sort of vision or whatever, and come back. I could see how you would feel like, oh, I've been chosen, or, something like that, suddenly that this means something really significant, rather than, oh, it was probably a hallucination.
Yeah. Well, and the last part of the question is just that which one of those leaps of faith is further? So the one to like some power, some all-powerful being, from completely materialistic world to suddenly I believe in some kind of all-powerful God being that's somehow in control of everything, to specifically the claims of the Hebrew Bible, or the Christian Bible, I should say.
Well, you say in control of everything. That seems like a really specific...
That's true. Even that is a very specific kind of God.
Yeah, because a lot of people, in particular, I think agnostics, will sort of believe like, oh, I could believe that there was a God who kind of kickstarted everything, or at least a presence of some kind bigger than all of us that, snapped his fingers and caused the Big Bang and has guided life on Earth to be able to flourish, but wouldn't necessarily care about your day-to-day life and your decisions and be involved in that. And I feel like, to me, a leap from zero to that belief is much, much smaller than the leap from a basic larger being consciousness to the Christian God.
Yeah.
Is a much, much wider leap to me.
The more specific attributes you add on, the less likely it becomes.
Yeah, which is why I could see myself, just because I don't want to be arrogant and I don't want to be faith-based in my beliefs, I would say I can't prove a negative. I can't prove that there isn't a all huge conscious being watching over us and everything. But I'm pretty sure it's not the Christian God version of things.
I'd say it's pretty unlikely. I mean, if you even think about just on a statistical level, if you're calculating the odds that there is a God who sent his son down to the earth to die for our sins, and then you add his name was Jesus, that probably exponentially decreases the odds again just by naming him.
Yeah.
Well, God, now he has to have a specific name.
Yeah, and also just when you're, I don't know. There's just a lot of things, like how Judaism ties into Christianity as well. All of these religions are kind of, you can see so much in the individual laws and rules that they're trying to control the populace with things that will either be best for the populace or that just they want to control them.
Yeah.
And I feel like when it's so clear, when you can so clearly see the human intention behind this divine word, that's where it kind of throws me off. Like,
yeah,
how is that better than the Greek god Zeus who just went around fucking everyone,
That's a much more likely god.
Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, if God made us in his image, then God's probably Zeus. Let's be real.
Yeah, man. We should start a church. Well, thank you for taking that question so seriously and engaging in I haven't talked about the religion thing for a long time. I've been over that for a while, but it's good to come back and chat about. It feels more and more ridiculous the further away I get. Well, I think we've been talking about religion so much this episode. I think maybe we should dive into that a little bit more the next episode. And we can talk about sex, I think. We could come up into that discussion.
Yes, sex!
We managed to impressively make it through this conversation without talking about sex a whole lot, which is kind of amazing for me, actually. I tend to talk about this a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, we can. Yeah, next episode will be a sexual episode of the news from La La Land.
After hours.
After dark. Yeah.
Well, sister, it's always really good to talk to you. And
yeah,
man, we've opened up the door here. So many more things to talk about. So many more great stories to share and absurd discussions to have. And I can't wait to do more of them. And that's the news from La La Land, where the hawks fly high
and the falcons swoop low.
Stay steamy, everyone.
The theme music for this podcast was written and recorded by Nick and Sarah Sokol, and the music you are hearing right now was performed by the band Nuage on their album Neuf, available now on iTunes and Spotify. News from La La Land is a production of Voice of Sokol. To learn more about Voice of Sokol and the rest of Sarah's creative content and services, visit voiceofsokol.com. Thanks so much for listening, and please drop us a line at voiceofsokol@gmail.com. We would love to hear your feedback.